Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 81 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Now, I've titled tonight's program, The Death of Democracy. And generally, I try and keep the topics of humanity versus insanity separate from those of Fracking Nightmare. But tonight, the two inextricably show that they are so interlinked that it is not possible to keep them separate from events of the past week or 10 days or so. So I'm going to be addressing a number of events that have occurred in recent days which absolutely demonstrate that democracy, the charade of democracy, is actually finished. And either the British public take an interest in what's going on in the political arena, or, sadly, the prognosis isn't exactly rocket science, and the global corporatist agenda will envelop the UK despite the recent vote for exiting the European Union. But before I get on to events of the past week, let me give an update on an issue that I was addressing last week, and that is the thumbprints being requested by Exercise for Less. And for those of you who haven't seen last week's program, I was recounting my experience with Exercise for Less, where I had joined a gym in the north of England. And part of the attraction was the fact that it was just $9.99 a month. And I could use the gym as often as I liked. And all I had to do in return was, give them my basic details, my written details. I didn't even permit them to take my photograph. They just had the written details and, of course, set up the payment of $9.99 a month. And then a few weeks ago, I was refused access because they had changed the access system from a PIN number to a thumbprint. Well, if I thought a photograph was bad enough, then a thumbprint was taking it one stage further. Well, a number of people contacted me to share their concerns over Exercise for Less's behaviour. And of course, they work on the basis of the vast majority of people will willingly give their thumbprint without any hesitation, for which Exercise for Less say thank you very much, because that is the data that will ultimately net them a lot more than the $9.99 a month that you're paying them for use of the gym. So here was a slogan that I pulled up last week: because it's in you, it's in us. Well, sure enough, if we give them the thumbprint, then that is in us, and it's now in them for them to do whatever it is that they feel appropriate to do with, which would generally mean selling out to the highest bidder. Now, part of that slogan on that page is be the change you want to see. And as I said last week, the change that I want to see is people actually standing up to whomever it is that is demanding their biometrics, because this is part of the creeping agenda to literally absorb humanity into the Internet of Things. Well, it seems that Exercise for Less have been the subject of other investigations, not least, this one was drawn to my attention by somebody who was watching last week. And this is available on the internet. I'm not sure it's on YouTube, but if you simply search for Exercise for Less BBC Watchdog, you can find this, I think it's 8-minute segment of Exercise for Less being investigated by Watchdog for their practices of effectively a heavy-handed approach to extracting the $9.99 a month from people. And, well, I won't repeat what's on the Watchdog program. I will put a link to it under the description of tonight's show. But the basis of the Watchdog program was that people were getting a pretty hard ride when they were trying to leave the gym. And in fact, it was established that Exercise for Less had a credit company which had its own enforcement agency, and they would be pretty intimidatory in trying to extract the $9.99. And a number of people obviously had this very unfortunate experience, and so Watchdog were put on the case. It's a very telling 8-minute segment. Well, what Exercise for Less claim that they have listened to the criticisms and that they have taken steps to making the process of leaving Exercise for Less somewhat simpler. But still, it would seem the only way in which you can actually leave them is online. And although I went into the gym last week to try to cancel my membership, because that's where I signed up physically at the gym, and they were told me that no, I couldn't end my membership at the gym as a result of their breach of contract. I had to do it online. Well, this is what you get when you go online. You get the top of the page, we're really sad to see you go. Well, they're not really that sad, and they're still going to try and make it as difficult as possible. And if you signed up, as I did, for the 12 months, and I would love to still be using the gym, but of course, I'm certainly not going to do that on the basis of handing over my thumbprint. But here it says, with the contract, I'm within my 12-month contract, but I wish to cancel. And it says, please note that you are contracted to a 12-month membership. You are only able to cancel this membership within your first 12 months due to relocation, redundancy, or for medical reasons. What is that all about? You know, I can't cancel a membership within 12 months for those reasons. But that aside, they don't just want you to state which of those reasons. They want you to attach evidence of your circumstances in support of your reason for cancelling within your 12-month contract. Relocation more than 15 miles away from the club, utility bill, medical reasons, doctor's letter or maternity certificate, redundancy, or employer evidence confirming your redundancy. So you see how much of your personal information that they are trying to get from you? Well, even if you simply quote one of those reasons, at the bottom of the online cancellation, there are still these stipulations. It says that I understand that by submitting this form, I'm giving 30 days notice to cancel my membership. I understand that one further direct debit will be taken from my account if my direct debit is due within the aforementioned 30 days. What it doesn't do is it doesn't give you an option to cancel the payment immediately, which I have done. And I have written to Exercise for Less stating that I have done this on the basis that they are in breach of contract because they have now refused to let me enter the gym for failing to give my thumbprint, which wasn't required when I signed up. So I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing saga. Somebody, I think possibly from Exercise for Less, put a comment under the YouTube video because I had referred to the people who had simply handed over their thumbprints as zombies, and they suggested that I actually say that to some of the somewhat larger guys at the gym. Well, what's the point? They wouldn't understand what I'm talking about anyway, because they have simply handed over their biometric data without giving it a second thought. Within a generation, sadly, of course, the children will be trained to literally hand over whatever biometric data it is that is requested of them. And life will be very, very different for that generation than it is today. Well, okay, so that's Exercise for Less. Now, obviously, over the coming weeks, it's going to be more and more difficult for me to get back to the studio because, as you're going to see, through tonight's program and in future weeks, particularly on Fracking Nightmare, then I am going to be up and down the country like the proverbial yo-yo. And, one of the most difficult things for me is actually being able to stay on the road, just from a financial point of view. It's an interesting lifestyle, I have to say. It really does give one an appreciation of maybe the term living in grace. And much of that is the good graces of people such as yourselves, the viewers of Humanity versus Insanity and indeed Fracking Nightmare. Because without your support, I really couldn't do what I do. And just to give you an example of how close to the edge this gets sometimes, when I was speaking at the Harrogate debate last week, I had enough fuel in the car to get to Harrogate. I didn't have enough to get back to where I was staying the other side of the Pennines. But, one has to have trust. And fortunately, although it wasn't a paid gig, but fortunately at the end of the evening, somebody came over and shook my hand and said thank you for the work that I put out, and slipped a few notes into my hand. And I got to say thank you very much, because that's what enabled me to get back across the Pennines. So if you do feel that me coming down to Plymouth on a regular as possible basis from the north of England is worthwhile, then please go to my website, ianrcrane.com, and there is an opportunity to make a donation, either a one-off or a regular donation, whichever you're able to do or you prefer. And this is to support the fracking awareness campaign, which, as you're going to see, is going to become increasingly important, because, many people watching this think, well, everybody by now must have heard of fracking. It's not possible to have not heard of fracking or to understand what it is that the British government is trying to do to this country. But, just walk down your high street and just pick on some random people and ask them what they think about the UK government's agenda to exploit the country for unconventional gas, and they will look at you as though you were on another planet. So, although I've been on this case now for a little over 4 years, and many others have been doing sterling work for the same, or in some cases even longer, but we still have a long way to go. And as you're going to see, the battle is going to become even more demanding as time goes on. So my website again is ianrcrane.com. And if you would prefer to buy some of the DVDs, then I can assure you that all the proceeds of those go directly back in to supporting me doing the work that I'm doing. Okay, so let's have a look at what's occurred during the course of this week. Well, without any shadow of doubt, of course, the villain of the week is this guy, Sajid Javid. And Sajid Javid, until literally a few weeks ago, when he was appointed into his current parliamentary role, then I was aware of the name, but not much more. But now he has been thrust into the spotlight due to him being the communities minister and ultimately being responsible for determining whether or not Lancashire should be fracked. In other words, overturning the decision taken by Lancashire County Council and literally rejecting the decision of the elected representatives of the community in the northwest of England and simply riding roughshod over them. So who is he? Who is Sajid Javid? Well, let me just give you a little bit of a rundown. As you can see from this graphic here, he does indeed originally hail from Rochdale. So I'm not sure whether Rochdale these days falls into Greater Manchester or Lancashire. But it's in that neck of the woods. Well, apparently he moved out with his family from Rochdale down to Bristol when he was in his teens and was educated at Bristol before going on to university and studying economics and politics, I believe. Well, then he joined the financial world. And in his latter days, his final days in the financial world before entering Parliament in 2010, he was a managing director with Deutsche Bank. For anybody who's following the imminent global financial collapse, then you'll be aware that all eyes of the financial community are indeed on Deutsche Bank, because if Deutsche Bank does succumb, then the likelihood is it's going to drag down a very significant chunk of the financial establishment. Well, maybe it was Sajid Javid realizing that maybe he'd put the wheels in motion for the pending collapse. Who knows? But anyway, did he have foresight to leave a sinking ship? Who knows? Anyway, he was selected to be the MP for Bromsgrove in Birmingham. His predecessor had to withdraw from the seat due to some issues with her expenses, and Sajid Javid was duly appointed. Now, he had a fairly rapid rise to fame. I mean, obviously with his background, particularly in banking, and it's estimated that his salary when he left Deutsche Bank in 2010 was probably somewhere in the region of about £3 million. So this is certainly a Rochdale boy made good. But the company that he keeps may not necessarily be that which his family and friends in Rochdale might wish him to keep. So today, it's from Wikipedia, Sajid Javid, Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. Although it would seem that it should be Secretary of State for Disdain for Communities and Local Government, seeing as, almost one of his first major announcements is to undermine Lancashire County Council. Well, he demonstrates the behaviours of a serious overachiever. Now, I have never met Sajid Javid, certainly. I've only seen some short clips of him, but it does appear that he is well qualified to be a politician because he is an arch blagger. And some of the clips that I have seen and some of the reports from them clearly are not particularly complimentary. And this was an interview where he was being held to account on some of his comments over the NHS. And, clearly, as with most politicians, they can only retain so much in the way of briefings. And if they're caught out, then they literally just have to blag. And more recently, of course, he got a bit of a mauling over his handling of the withdrawal of Tata from the British steel industry, making some claims that were subsequently proven not to be based in fact. Does that actually qualify him as having a rather casual relationship with the truth? Which, of course, really wouldn't be any different from any other politician. And in fact, when he was before the Parliamentary Select Committee, the chairman said it looked like you were on the back foot scrambling around rather than in control. And I think that is a pretty good description. And you see, this is what our politicians do not like. They do not like being held account. They do not like the scrutiny that is applied, whether it's parliamentary select committees or whether it's their electorate. They simply want to be elected. They want your vote. We all know that they can swing it, or there are ways in which the ballots can be swung, thanks to Peter Lilly's company and their contract for managing the postal vote system. Well, that aside, the electorate, whether they voted for them or not, they are still their MP. And the vast majority of people just allow their MP to go about their business without worrying about it, without scrutinising it in any way. That is what has to change. Well, I was really quite intrigued that Sajid Javid has had such a sort of rapid rise in his political career. So I just started to, look in the usual sources to see who could be backing this relatively young politician who, until he came into Parliament in 2010, had zero experience in the political arena. All his experience was in banking. Well, gasp of surprise, first place I look, and sure enough, he was courted by the Conservative Friends of Israel. And so literally just 2 years after entering Parliament, he goes off on a trip to Israel, courtesy of the Friends of Israel. And if we look at the last paragraph on this page, what it says here is, during a day-long visit to the south, the group travelled to the town of Sderot, near the Gaza border, to meet with the town's deputy mayor to see the different type of rockets launched from Gaza and sample the local cuisine. Well, somehow I have a feeling that during this trip, they didn't get the opportunity to go across the other side of the border into the Gaza Strip and actually meet with community representatives in Gaza to talk about the type of weapons that the Israelis use on Gaza. So I'm sure Sajid Javid's Muslim colleagues in Palestine were really impressed that he was wined and dined and courted by the Friends of Israel back in 2012. And who else was with him on that trip? Well, none other than Mark Menzies. And of course, Mark Menzies just happens to be the MP for the File Peninsula, the area that Sajid Javid has just ridden roughshod over, and Amber Rudd, who will be well known to viewers of Fracking Nightmare. Of course, she's still in the picture. So this band of ministers, there's not a statesman amongst them. These are kids. These are little more than kids playing at politics. Well, playing at politics, they are playing at politics because basically they are doing whatever their master bids them. In return, of course, for the lifestyle where they can effectively bank their salary because they live on expenses. Well, this is the report from the another report, by the way. This is from 2012. And so this is a few months after Sajid Javid had visited Israel. And he attended a dinner hosted by the Friends of Israel. And this is the report that appeared in the Jewish Chronicle. And this is the headline: Muslim Tory MP, after Britain, Israel is best. And this is the quote: Mr. Javid, who described himself as a proud British-born Muslim, announced that if he had to leave Britain to live in the Middle East, then he would choose Israel as home. Only there, he said, would his children feel the warm embrace of freedom and liberty, just like the Palestinians do in Gaza and on the West Bank. They know all about the warm embrace of freedom and liberty. For him, for Sajid Javid, only Israel shared the democratic values of the UK. Well, Sajid Javid has shown us quite clearly his attitude towards democratic values. But I think if anybody thinks that Israel is a democracy, then they're as deluded as those who think that Britain is a democracy. By the way, just while I'm on the subject of conservatives tripping out to Israel as guests of the Conservative Friends of Israel, viewers north of the border might be interested to note that a couple of months ago, the Conservative Friends of Israel leads the first ever delegation of Scottish Conservatives to Israel. So there we see there's the list of all the MSPs, Mark McKinsey's, the Scottish Conservative Chief Whip, John Lamont, MSP, Maurice Golden, MSP, Jamie Green, MSP, Rachel Hamilton, Dean Lockhart, Oliver Mundell, Douglas Rose, Ross Thompson, and Annie Wells. So any areas where these MPs may be called upon to make crunch decisions, then you don't have to look too far back into history to see perhaps who is pulling their strings. So Sajid Javid, as of Thursday. Now, many of us predicted that when Sajid Javid came to make this decision, that he would most probably overrule Lancashire County Council and award Preston New Road to Quadrilla as a location where they could drill and frack, which could potentially be the first well to be fracked since Quadrilla triggered the seismic events in the File Peninsula back in 2011. but that he would uphold the Lancashire County Council decision and not grant Quadrilla the opportunity to drill and frack at Rossiter. But no, such is Sajid Javid's disregard for British democracy that he gave the go-ahead to unequivocal go-ahead to start operations at Preston Road, but he also stated that he was minded to grant Quadrilla the opportunity to drill and frack at Rossiter, pending them resubmitting a revised traffic plan. So, this is so patronising, but that's exactly what you expect from an overachiever. An overachiever who has the arrogance to believe that he is right on everything. Now, bear in mind, he has made this decision without any consultation with the local community. And, as I presented many months ago, the whole process after Lancashire County Council had made their decision, the whole process of the appeal, the 6 weeks appeal, and now the review to make this decision on October the 6th of last week, then at that point, he has effectively triggered a social uprising that the Conservative Party could never have believed. Now, I have said before that I have a sense that Theresa May be looking for a way out of this. And maybe, just maybe, Sajid Javid is the fall guy here. He's the guy that's basically going to take all the heat when this all goes south. So here we go. This is from The Sun, I believe. No going back. At last, the UK can frack. Well, over at the Daily Mirror, they ran a poll, and this is the article they ran. Should fracking be allowed in the UK? The arguments for and against. Well, after 4 days, so you couldn't argue that this was just the anti-fracking community getting on board and getting their votes in. This is after 4 days. So, this is, I think, a fairly balanced response in that respect, right across the social strata, as it were. And 96% say no. Only 4% say yes. Sajid Javid, he looked familiar to me. He looked really familiar to me. Do you remember this guy? It's the Hood. The Hood out of Thunderbirds. And one of my good friends, who happens to be somewhat of an aficionado on the Jerry Anderson puppet show, said, well, you might be interested in one of the quotes from the Hood. And the quote is, "If only I knew their secrets, I would be the wealthiest man in the world." Well, that, of course, is perhaps why Sajid Javid went to Israel, trying to glean some of the secrets. But anyway, that statement isn't attributed to Sajid Javid. It's attributed to Agent X2O from Thunderbirds. Well, Sajid Javid, this was him at a Conservative event, and I think this is what's going through his head there, because he certainly isn't showing any empathy whatsoever with the people of Lancashire. And of course, although he was born and raised in his early years in Rochdale, he was raised in his latter life in Bristol, now represents Birmingham, so he's far enough removed from the people of Lancashire to claim that he made the decision independently. Well, after Lancashire County Council made the decision to not allow Quadrilla to drill and frack in the Fylde Peninsula, just 3 days later, Amber Rudd, I did mention her just now, she was on the same trip to Israel as Sajid Javid, and Amber Rudd made the decision after 13 years of wrangling. She made the decision to grant permission for gas caverns to be constructed also on the Fylde Peninsula, just outside the town of Fleetwood. So I don't know whether the people of the Fylde Peninsula have actually picked up on this just yet, but the bottom line is the British government doesn't care about you. The attitude of the British government is that, go swivel. Don't care. Mark Menzies is your MP, and Mark Menzies is an archetypal MP. Of course, he's been compromised. We don't need to go into the detail of that. That's all been addressed prior. So Mark Menzies will do whatever it is he's told to do by the whips, but anyone who is under the illusion that Mark Menzies represents their interests, wake up. Wake up. How many pieces of democratic process do you have to go through to find out or realize that your elected representatives have no power? It's a charade. The power that the people have comes down to now putting their boots on the ground. But it's not over yet. It's not over yet, because Quadrilla don't even have a well site at either Preston New Road or at Rossiter. And the injunction that was put on the well site on the field at Preston New Road 2 years ago, following the Reclaim the Power camp there, that injunction expired on Saturday. So Quadrilla, if you want an injunction, then you got to go rethink that one. Meanwhile, expect to see more of this company, Bell Pottinger. Now, Bell Pottinger, as far as I am aware, are still Quadrilla's PR company. And I made a very brief mention of this on last Monday's programme because it was breaking news at the time. And that is that Bell Pottinger had been caught, or exposed, I should say, as having taken money from the Pentagon to effectively create propaganda videos as part of psychological warfare during the Iraq invasion. But it's not the first time that they've been, if you like, at the wrong end of investigative journalism. And this is from their website here, providing key political insights and influential campaigns. Well, 5 years ago, this was a report from The Independent, caught on camera, top lobbyists boasting how they can influence the Prime Minister. Special undercover investigation. Executives from Bell Pottinger revealed dark arts they use to burnish reputations of countries accused of human rights violations. So, well, I have to say that, you're not doing a very good job on Israel, are you? Because it doesn't matter how much PR you put out. The reality is we know that the human rights record of Israel is absolutely abysmal. But the article goes on. One of Britain's largest lobbying companies has been secretly recording, boasted about its access to the heart of the government and how it uses the dark arts to bury bad coverage and influence public opinion. An undercover investigation by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, published in The Independent, has taped senior executives at Bell Pottinger, claiming that they have used their access to Downing Street to get David Cameron to speak to the Chinese premier on behalf of one of their business clients within 24 hours of asking him to do so. Boasting about Bell Pottinger's access to the Foreign Secretary William Hague, to Cameron's Chief of Staff Ed Llewellyn, and to Cameron's closest number 10 advisor Steve Hilton, and suggesting that the company could manipulate Google results to drown out negative coverage of human rights violations and child labour. So then to last week, and I think it took about 4 days for this to actually appear anywhere in the mainstream media. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I might actually put a little bit more time and effort into looking at any connection between Bell Pottinger's executives and Kim Kardashian. Because that little charade of the hotel robbery of a $3.5 million ring that looked like a lump of glass, well, of course, it's all evaporated from the media now. But what it did on Monday and Tuesday and into Wednesday of last week, what it did was it effectively hijacked all of the front pages of the British media, which just goes to show, what they perceive, and probably rightly so, what the British public are more interested in. But this is how the manipulation is managed. So maybe if I have a bit of time, I'll take a look over the coming days and just see if there's any interesting links that I can establish between Bell Pottinger, Kim Kardashian, or Kanye West. And we'll see what manifests. Even if there wasn't a contact, then of course all it would have taken is a phone call. And here's the Mail Online article. PR firm set up by Margaret Thatcher's spin doctor, Lord Bell, ran a top-secret £416 million propaganda operation during the Iraq War, writing soap operas and tracking Al-Qaeda terrorists using fake jihad films. Now, this was very sophisticated because they weren't just creating the propaganda, but they were setting it up so they could literally track IP addresses of those who were watching these videos. And the article continues. A London-based PR firm carried out a $540 million covert propaganda operation from an office in Iraq, it has been revealed. Bell Pottinger, the firm set up by Margaret Thatcher's PR guru, Lord Bell, in 1989, set up a base in Camp Victory in Baghdad. From here, nearly 300 staff operated a top-secret psychological operations task force, which included writing soap operas and allegedly distributing fake Al-Qaeda videos, which were used to track the people watching them. Well, we know that the British Army are putting more and more effort into psychological operations. I think it's, isn't it 77? Task Force 77 or something is the GCHQ group that has been set up to track communications of extremists. Well, this is the nature of the beast. This is what we're up against, because Bell Pottinger have a proven track record of what you would expect from a PR company. Same as you'd expect from politicians. Lies, deceit, and obfuscation. And of course, the British government and their PR companies right now are desperate to try to get the British public behind their ongoing war, the latest ongoing war in Syria. And despite the fact that it's now 3 years since David Cameron first tried to get Parliament to support him in an attack on Assad, that this is still going on. And of course, this isn't a civil war. This is agents of the global corporatist. So this is ISIS, Daesh, whatever what you want to call them, ISIL, but it's ostensibly Israel, the UK, and the USA launching covert assault on a sovereign nation. And the good news is that more and more people are starting to see through it. But the PR, the money spent on the PR is enormous. It's a bottomless pit. So it needs everybody to stay vigilant, to do their research, and of course to share their insights as widely as possible. And as we have discussed many, many times on this program and on Fracking Nightmare, the key element of the alternative media is not to necessarily reach large numbers of people, but for the ripple effect to occur. And, with that in mind, what I would like to ask is if there is anyone out there who wants to download episodes of Humanity vs. Insanity or Fracking Nightmare and repost them on their own video channels, then please feel free to do so, because I certainly don't hold any copyright on these broadcasts. And what's important is to simply get the word out there, to spread the word, to encourage people to do their own research and to come to their own realization of what's occurring. The establishment know very, very well that more and more people are starting to see through the charade. Politicians now are hiding, in some cases, from their constituents, particularly those constituents who are putting them under scrutiny and asking the hard questions. We've actually had cases of some MPs claiming that they are being stalked and claiming that they are being harassed. That's political speak for somebody in my constituency asking me questions that I'd rather not have to answer. And so rather than one or two people or a handful of people have to pick up this responsibility, the more people that we can encourage to do it, go down to see your MPs in groups. Go down to their local surgeries, with a list of questions and ask them to come out and speak to the group and address these questions. And you watch how they blag. You watch how uncomfortable they are. They are like deers in the headlights. I mean, I feel for some of the MPs. Some of the MPs that I've spoken to, they can't look you in the eye. They can't answer the question, and they know that what you're saying is fundamentally correct. But the party leadership, the party whip, has them by the proverbial short and curlies. What can we do? Help them. Help them to realise that they have support from within their community. Help them to feel comfortable in raising the hard issues. Yeah, they may run the risk of not being reselected in the next parliament, but some of them I actually feel do have a conscience. Others, like Sajid Javid, no conscience at all. Sajid Javid will never be able to explain why he has made that decision. He doesn't have the interest to study this subject in depth. He will have skimmed it, he will have listened to his advisors, and he will simply have said, yep, I'm going to give permission to frack. The one thing I can pretty much guarantee is that Sajid Javid will never participate in a debate with anyone from the anti-fracking community. And talking of which, I'll talk more about this in Fracking Nightmare later on this evening. But the Harrogate debate was a very interesting event. And I think it was not quite unique because there have been other debates, but the one thing that I feel fairly confident about is that the video that was taken of that event by the pro-fracking team will never appear in the public domain. Somehow I have a sense that they would rather keep that under wraps, despite actually stating that when they watched it back, it gave them a bit of a giggle. Well, give us all a giggle, Lorraine and Ken. Give everyone a giggle and let everyone share the experience of the Harrogate debate, because John Plummer and I, who proposed the motion that fracking should be banned in the UK with immediate effect, we have absolutely no qualms about the video being put into the public domain. And consequently, the ball is in your court. If that video is not put into the public domain shortly, then I think that that will indeed speak volumes. Well, Lancashire is a beautiful county. It's sad how many people think of Lancashire as an industrial area of the country. Of course, there are parts of it that have been industrialised over the years. Unfortunately, obviously much of the industry has long gone, but it's regenerating slowly. But the parts of particularly East Lancashire, parts that people don't normally travel through, are absolutely stunning. And one place that I have become quite partial to is Pendle Hill. And actually, for the second time in 8 days, in fact, yesterday, I found myself once again at the top of Pendle Hill. The previous Sunday was also a beautiful day, no wind, high cloud, and it's a stunning view of East Lancashire. Unfortunately, of course, it also looks down into the Ribble Valley, which is an area that has been licensed for unconventional gas exploitation. And although those licenses are not being pursued right now, as far as we know, there's no applications been submitted to local authorities, but nonetheless they are licensed, and the important thing is obviously that local communities become aware. Well, I will be back in that area next week, and not necessarily at the top of Pendle Hill, but I will be at Accrington for an event there on the Sunday afternoon at the Calder Pub, Accrington. This is being organised by the local group Keep East Lancashire Frack Free, and I'll be discussing a lot more of what I've been talking about this evening. So thank you very much for joining me. Democracy is under threat. Every one of us has to get involved. No episode of Humanity vs. Insanity next week, so I will see you in 2 weeks. And for regular viewers, I'll see you at 9 o'clock with Fracking Nightmare.